They whispered softly, but lied with purpose. "Welcome to Marple Mysteries. I am your host, Harrington. Share your city. I love seeing them all." Wolfe untangles deceit wrapped in kindness. If you know anything about life at West 35th Street, you know there are 3 kinds of knocks on our front door. The first is the polite tap-tap from delivery boys who've learned the difference between our doorstep and a bus depot. The second is the nervous rattle from the penitent and the guilty, who arrive with eyes like chipped saucers and stories that swear they're not stories. The third is what we got that day, a measured, cultured triple rap that didn't plead and didn't apologize. It assumed. Fritz had just carried in a pear tart that smelled honest enough to be a sworn witness. Nero Wolfe was midway between his chair and his appetite, which is to say, he sat deep in the red leather with the content expression of a man who knows butter exists to fulfill a destiny. My job, as usual, was to breathe, observe, and try not to antagonize him into rescuing me with a dictionary definition. The knock came again. 3, precisely the same pattern. I looked at the tart, then at Wolfe, who arched a brow at me like the world's largest metronome. "Confound it," he said, not loudly. "The door." "I'll go out on a limb and say that's where knocks come from," I said, and headed down the hall. On the stoop stood a woman who looked like she'd never been kept waiting for anything she wanted. Late 30s, maybe 40 if time had to play fair. A plain black dress that cost too much to be plain, gloves the color of milk, and a hat with a wit of its own. She had the stance of a dancer who'd decided the stage was useful only for crossing it. Beside her, a man in his 20s bracketed himself into the background, freckled, tidy with the conscientious posture of someone who practiced apologizing in the mirror. "Yes?" I said, giving her the Goodwin service smile. Friendly enough to soothe, sharp enough to suggest I could stop smiling. "I'm Lila Merrow," she said. No flutter, no card. She offered the fact as if her name picked out its own chair in every room. "This is Mr. Rafe Simon. We have an appointment with Mr. Wolfe." "You do not," I told her, because they did not. "I see," she said, and her eyes did a stroll over my shoulder as if Wolfe might be hovering in the vestibule like a chandelier. "Then it is fortunate that we also have urgency." I could smell 3 things. Her perfume, which had cost someone a trip to Paris. The breeze from the street, which carried burnt chestnuts and last night's arguments, and the pear tart, which now existed in the past tense. "Urgency is popular," I said. "We're booked solid. Try spring." "I won't keep him long." She slipped off her glove with a snap of silk giving up. From the bag at her elbow she withdrew an envelope, long and cream, and sealed with a wax. Blob that was trying very hard not to be dramatic. A tiny impression of a bee showed in the seal. She held it up where it would not be mistaken for a tip. "This should secure a few minutes." Now, people bring all sorts of oddities to our door. Statuettes, confessions, hats containing other hats. A wax seal with a bee wasn't the oddest. Still, the bee buzzed at a memory. I had seen its cousin once on a jar in the kitchen, grainy peppercorns Wolfe rationed as if they were truffles in wartime. Fritz called them grains of paradise and said Wolfe obtained them from a source who packed with a bee. "You could have mailed it," I said. "You'd have saved yourself a cab fare and your messenger his cholesterol." "It is addressed to Mr. Wolfe," she said, "from a mutual acquaintance." "Name of the acquaintance?" Her smile got thinner without getting smaller. "He used to be the sort who disliked announcements. Now he dislikes adjectives." It was a neat line, but the kind that makes you itch. I took the envelope. It had weight. A single sheet, maybe 2, and not cheap paper. The hand on the front was a slow hand with confidence. The name there was Nero Wolfe, nothing else, as if the mail knew where to find him and New York was optional. "The urgency," I said. "Something delicate," she said, "but not fragile." She looked at me and I saw it then, under the polish. A person who had learned to hold her breath while men talked. I don't bring folks up to the office on a whim. We charge a consulting fee, not admission. But rules exist to be obeyed by me and adjusted by circumstances. I glanced at the kid, Rafe Simon. He kept his eyes at the lintel like a good soldier. I told them to wait and took the envelope down the hall to the office. Wolfe set down his fork as if the fork had offended him by existing. I handed him the envelope. He turned it over, saw the seal, and his eyes did something I'd rate as a flicker if I were generous. On Wolfe, it qualified as cartwheels. He broke the seal with his thumb and read, "Wolfe reads like a man who intends to finish." The silence grew a second story. Finally, he folded the sheet, slid it back in, and regarded me without regard. "Show them in," he said. "Both?" "Both." So I showed them in. Wolfe didn't get up. He never does if he can help it. Lila Merrow entered as if she attended a salon every Tuesday at 4, and this was an extra Tuesday. Rafe Simon followed, the air of one who would apologize for breathing if someone wrote it down. Ms. Merrow took the red leather client chair without waiting for me to pull it. Rafe took the green one because there was nowhere else to put his joints. Wolfe set the envelope at the edge of his desk, face down, B up. "You have my attention," he told her. "That condition will expire rapidly unless you are more concise than most." "I'll be precise," she said. "Conciseness is not always kind. You are not here to be kind." "True." That exchanged, I considered the afternoon safe for eavesdropping. I took my usual desk and drew a notebook because pens are more comforting to clients than pistols. "I chair the Verity Foundation's Culinary Archive," Merrow said. "We collect, conserve, and sponsor research in food history. Recipes, letters, diaries, shipping ledgers. The detritus of appetite." "Appetite's detritus," Wolfe murmured, "constitutes civilization." She nodded as if she'd expected that and was satisfied to have gotten it. "Our current exhibit, Gentle Lies, opens in 2 weeks. Pardon, Mr. Goodwin, the title will make sense in a moment. It concerns the social fictions we tell at the table. Etiquette manuals, menu names that elide ingredients. The lies nobody minds telling because they oil the gears." "And your trouble?" Wolfe asked. "We've been receiving anonymous corrections," she said. "Small notes affixed to proofs and labels. Some are innocuous. This date is actually 1896. But a few are not. A donor's provenance questioned. A private letter transcribed in full when it was only excerpted with permission. A chef's story labeled apocryphal when she is very much alive and prepared to sue anyone who calls her a liar. Last night, someone switched a descriptive card in our prep room. It read, "This is not an error, it is a kindness." "Ah," Wolfe said. He patted the arm of his chair, considering the grain. "Gentle Lies. Not mine, not the exhibit's, someone else's." She smoothed her glove over her knee. "It has the taste of sabotage, but not to ruin us, to nudge us. It's harder to swat a hand that adjusts your tie." Rafe Simon leaned in, then leaned back, calibrating. "Ms. Merrow asked me to keep the proofs under lock," he said. "I did. I swear I did. But whoever is doing this has a key. Or is a key." "Mr. Simon is my assistant," Merrow said. "He is diligent." "Good," Wolfe said without warmth. "Diligence is a commodity. Trust is not. What is the letter to me, Ms. Merrow, if I may guess?" "Leverage?" "Introduction," she said. "From a mutual acquaintance, as I said. He believed you would prefer the word of a palate you respect." "And whose palate is that?" I asked, before Wolfe could discourage curiosity with a glare. Merrow glanced at the envelope, then at Wolfe. He let her hang a second and then nodded, the kind of nod that looks like surrender but is actually conquest on a delay. "An old supplier," Wolfe said. "He grows what he will, and what he will is often what I cannot otherwise obtain. He advises me rarely on matters that intersect his pride." "Does botany mind if I know his name?" I asked. "It does," Wolfe said. So that was that. Your foundation, Wolfe went on. It has rivals. We all do, she said. There's the New York Culinary Institute's library, the private collection at the Arden Club, and a man named Oscott Vale who buys letters at auction and hoards them like a dragon, then sells curated edits to magazines. We've squabbled, but this isn't their style. They like overt victories. And internally, Wolfe asked, You're bored? She smiled again, that crisp thinness. We are a non-profit, Mr. Wolfe. We perform only voluntary acts of generosity, and only to the extent they improve our standing. Of course we squabble. Wolfe turned his head my way, which meant I was tasked without being told to be tasked. Names, he said. Gladly, Nero said. My board co-chair is Gabriel Dorrell, made money in software and now wants to civilize it by proximity to parchment. Dr. Siobhan Shue, an anthropologist with a monograph ahead of her. Mrs. Dana Bell, widow of a steakhouse empire who thinks mayonnaise is the sign of moral weakness. And our chief curator, Emmett Crow, brilliant, contrary, thinks donor relations is a synonym for ritual sacrifice. There's also our registrar, Mara Pike, who can find a tablespoon in the dark and remind you it was promised to someone's grandmother in 1924. And your donors who would be implicated by the corrections, I asked. Nero hesitated. Mrs. Bell donated a ledger with a, how shall I put it, optimistic chain of custody. Dr. Shue's forthcoming article uses a letter we transcribed selectively at the request of the author's estate. The anonymous notes supplied the unexpurgated text. Mr. Dorrell's pet chef, a television personality with a biography made of frosting, is labeled apocryphal in her origin story. In short, Wolfe said, the saboteur asserts a higher truth in the name of kindness. Or claims it, she said, and leaves me to sweep up the glass while smiling. I couldn't help it. Why us? Why not the police? The police? Her eyebrows played seesaw. To say what? Someone is adjusting nouns at my museum. They have stabbings to attend to. Also, Mr. Wolfe, we like our donors pliant. A precinct is not a softening agent. Wolfe stared at the envelope as if the bee might share a thought. Fees? We'll pay your customary rate, she said, and we'll obey your customary impertinences. He puffed his lips. Impertinences are not customary. They are bespoke. He closed his eyes for a moment, sorting his mind the way Fritz sorts herbs. Basil with basil, mint never near the oregano. Mr. Goodwin, he said, opening them, you will arrange to visit the Verity Foundation this afternoon. You will see Miss Nero and Mr. Simon to a cab, then return to ensure Fritz's tart does not suffer deterioration. Glad to be essential, I said. To be clear, Nero cut in. You will take the case. Wolfe looked at her as you might look at a rook that had moved itself onto a precarious square. I will, he said. And as for my reason, no doubt it's the one you suspect. Pride is easily bruised, Miss Nero. Mine, yours, and that of the man who sent your letter. If someone wishes to demonstrate that kindness can wound as efficiently as malice, I will oblige them with an audience. A small exhale left her, not relief exactly, but the payment of a debt. Good, then allow me one more courtesy. She reached into her bag and produced a small tin no larger than a watch case. A token from a donor's pantry. He said Mr. Wolfe would recognize it. She laid it on the edge of the desk. The tin was unmarked, but when Wolfe cracked it, a smell lifted that snapped the room into focus. Pepper, citrus, a whisper of cardamom. Grains of paradise, ground fine. Wolfe set the tin down as if it had spoken. He did not thank her. In this house, gratitude is an action, not an utterance. I will call you, he said. Mr. Goodwin will see the rooms you wish him to see, the labels you wish him to read, and the keys you prefer not to count. You will tell your board that you have engaged a consultant. Do not dress the word. Do not brief them beyond necessity. Of course, she said. She stood. So did Rafe Simon, who had not exhaled in 15 minutes. On the way out, in the hall, she paused. "Mr. Goodwin," she said softer, "the title of our exhibit, Gentle Lies, you know what I mean by it." "I know what you say you mean," I told her. "I mean the stories that spare us without saving us," she said. "We're all better at those than we admit." "Speak for yourself," I said, and opened the door. When I came back to the office, Wolfe was still watching the little tin like it might jump the line and pitch itself onto his dinner. I took my chair. "Do we like her?" I asked. "We don't," he said. "We regard her as we do a knife. Valuable, dangerous, sharp at one end." "And the kid?" "Earnestness is a solvent," he said. "It dissolves everything but guilt." "That's pretty," I said. "What about our old supplier with the bee stationery?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "He has a habit of meddling in matters of taste," he murmured. "And he is rarely wrong when he reports that someone offends it." "Someone's offended your taste at the Verity Foundation." "Someone has offended mine," he said, "by renovating truth with the same smugness one uses to arrange flowers in symmetrical bouquets. It will not do." Which, translated, meant I had marching orders. I made a note of the names as neat as I could manage, which is as neat as anyone should trust a detective to be, and then ventured, "You know, you turned away a 3-day retainer last week because a stockbroker's mistress thought the guy was massaging numbers." "The stockbroker's mistress," he said, "wanted absolution at a discount." "And Miss Merrow?" "Wants to be right without being honest," he said. "That is a common desire. It breeds interesting enemies." I didn't argue. There are times you don't need to be right, just ready. I went to find my hat and inform my shoes we were going to a museum that collected lies with curation and climate control. Behind me, the office slid back into its usual order. The big globe, the files like soldiers, the orchid schedule waiting upstairs. On the desk, the bee on the broken seal gleamed in a slant of light, the wax catching a pattern like honeycomb. If a lie can be gentle, I thought, it can also be hungry. Fritz, meeting me at the door with a look of bereavement, said, "You missed the tart." "I'll tell it I loved it," I said, and stepped into the city that manufactures urgency wholesale. The Verity Foundation sat on West 63rd like a dowager aunt, pretending she didn't gossip. A polished brass plaque, discreet lettering, and a doorman who looked like he issued moral judgments with the umbrellas. Inside, the air smelled faintly of linen and intellectual propriety. I gave my name, my purpose, and the smallest smile I could manage without scaring the staff, and was shown to Miss Lila Merrow's office, a room with windows large enough to host regret. She was behind her desk, jacket off, hair pinned with military precision. Rafe Simon stood at a side cabinet labeling folders as though the fate of Western civilization depended on alphabetical order. When I entered, she looked up, appraising, like someone deciding whether to serve the entree or change the menu. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I expected you at 3. "I'm early," I told her. "New York traffic, occasionally guilty of kindness." That earned a half smile before she gestured toward a chair. "You'll want to see the prep rooms first. We've secured the exhibit area, but the tampering occurred in the archives downstairs. Nothing was forced, no locks broken, no cameras tripped." I jotted notes while watching her movements, precise, brisk, without a wasted syllable. If she'd ever lied, she'd done it on expensive stationery. Rafe joined us with a keyring the size of an argument. "I'll guide you," he said. "Ms. Merrow has a meeting in 15 minutes. She corrected him mildly. 10. Then to me, "You'll find our staff cooperative, within reason." Which, in translation, meant they'd talk as long as it suited their own narrative. I followed Rafe down a narrow stairwell that smelled of lemon oil and history. The basement corridor opened onto rooms lined with shelves of labeled boxes, each stacked like disciplined soldiers. A humidifier hummed in the corner, making the air feel expensive. "This," Rafe said, unlocking a door, "is where we assemble temporary displays. The switch happened here." Inside, a long table stood under track lighting, half covered in placards and display cards. One stood out. Ivory cardstock, serif type, the kind of quiet authority curators love. He pointed. "That one, it's the replacement." I bent over it. The line read, "This is not an error. It is a kindness." Below it, in smaller print, "Exhibit item withdrawn." "Where was the original?" I asked. He fished from a drawer another card. It should have read, "Recipe transcription, 1837, verified by the Nero collection. We found the fake one in its place this morning. No sign of the original." "And you're sure no one else had access?" He flushed. "Every employee has access, technically. But only I handle installation prep. I locked up last night, I swear I did." "I believe you," I said, which was polite fiction. "Who was last in this room before closing?" He hesitated. "Dr. Shu. She was cross-checking a date. She's, well, precise." "Precise people can be the sloppiest when they're sure of themselves," I said. "Anyone else?" "Mara Pike, our registrar. She was cataloguing textiles in the next room. She left before Dr. Hashu." I circled the table, scanning for fingerprints or crumbs. Anything that might make Wolfe twitch with interest. The place was immaculate, except for a faint smudge on the table's edge, oily like residue from polished wood or cosmetics. "You mind if I take this?" I asked. Rafe blinked. "That's a table." The smudge. I produced a small envelope from my pocket. Wolfe always insists I carry evidence bags, though half the time it's for pastry crumbs. Never know what curiosity will feed on. He nodded, uncertain whether to admire or fear me. I pocketed the envelope and turned to the display boards on the far wall. One bore a list of donors: Dorrell, Shu, Bell, Crow, all neatly typed. Beside each, a handwritten note pinned discreetly to the margin. Short corrections, some dates, one question mark. The handwriting was small, elegant, female. "Are these the anonymous notes?" I asked. "Yes. They appeared overnight on 3 occasions, always accurate except for one. That one implied Dr. Shu had misattributed a recipe. She hadn't. So, a saboteur with taste," I murmured, "or a perfectionist with resentment." That was worth a nod. Resentment is the yeast of sabotage. I asked for the building's security logs. Rafe produced them, a tidy spreadsheet showing door access entries. Between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. last night, 4 names appeared: Shu, Pike, Simone, and a janitor named Cardoza. After that, silence. "Cardoza," I said. "Still around?" "He's off today." "Good," I said. "Then I'll find him." Back upstairs, Miss Merrow was just hanging up her phone, expression taut as pastry dough before the bake. "Find anything?" she asked. A sense of order with room for mischief. One missing placard, one smudge, one suspect list that reads like a dinner seating plan for concealed grudges. Her eyes flicked toward Rafe. "You'll keep me informed, of course." "Religiously," I said. "Do you have handwriting samples from staff?" She hesitated, and then reached into a drawer and pulled out personnel forms. "You're very thorough, Mr. Goodwin." "I'm paid to make other people thorough," I said. When I left, the air outside felt raw. City wind sneaking down my collar. I found a cab and called the brownstone. Fritz answered, his accent thicker when irritated. "Mr. Wolfe is in the plant rooms," he said. "Tell him I'm on my way with a report, and possibly the ghost of a polite vandal." By the time I got home, Wolfe was back in his chair, a book open beside him titled The Semantics of Taste. He looked up long enough to acknowledge I'd obeyed physics. "Well," he said. "5 suspects, 1 clever ghost," I reported, and ran through the details. The card swap, the handwriting, the oily smudge, and the security list. Wolfe listened, eyes half-lidded, like a cat pretending to nap while planning a coup. When I finished, he asked, "The smudge, describe its odor." "Like furniture polish with a hint of citrus," he grunted. "Foolish. That is wax from lemon balm oil. Ms. Nero uses it in her office for her gloves." I raised a brow. "You mean she touched what she should not," Wolfe said, "and left evidence to be found. Either she seeks to impress me or to misdirect you. That's a polite way to say she's lying." "Not lying," he said, almost indulgent. "Performing truth's dress rehearsal." He leaned back, fingers steepled. "Tomorrow you will visit Dr. Haishu. Observe her demeanor. Then Emmett Crow. Do not interrogate. Listen. The liar will insist on precision. The guilty will insist on motive. And Miss Nero, let her think she has engaged me fully," he said. "It costs her confidence. It earns us clarity." He closed his eyes. "This tampering is not random, Archie. Someone is rewriting honesty with the grammar of benevolence. Such people are dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked. "They confuse virtue for license," he said, "and kindness for control." I didn't have an answer to that, so I just nodded, already planning the next morning's visits. Behind me, the hum of the orchids filled the silence, soft and precise, like a secret that hadn't yet chosen its owner. The next morning arrived with the kind of November chill that persuades even the honest to lie about feeling fine. Wolfe, of course, remained immune to weather, conscience, and anything that required rising before 10. I left him barricaded behind orchids and philosophy and headed uptown to Columbia, where Dr. Siobhan Sue taught anthropology and, from all reports, terror. Her office was in a building that looked as though it had been designed by a committee allergic to sunlight. When I knocked, a clipped voice said, "Enter," and I did, finding her seated behind a desk scattered with open volumes. She had the kind of face that could slice fruit by looking at it. Sharp eyes, no humor, precision for breakfast. "Mr. Goodwin," she said before I'd introduced myself. "Miss Nero told me you'd come. I hope you're more efficient than the last man she sent." "I don't know who that was," I said, "but I'll try to be an improvement. That's a low bar in most professions." She didn't smile, which was fine. I hadn't offered a real joke. I sat, uninvited, and opened my notebook. "I understand you're part of the Verity Foundation board. You were at the archive the night the placard was switched." She nodded once. "I was reviewing transcription notes. I left at 9:30. I signed out. Rafe can confirm that." "I've seen the log. Did you notice anyone else in the area?" "Only Mara Pike for a short while. She catalogues textiles, but likes to remind everyone she could do their jobs if she had the time. She left around 9. I was alone after that." "Alone," I repeated. "That makes you either lucky or unlucky, depending on the story." "I don't tell stories," she said. "I correct them. Miss Nero's exhibit is ambitious, but she dresses scholarship in sentiment. Gentle lies, indeed. History is built on brutal truths, the kind you shouldn't sand down for polite company." I noted the phrasing, too polished to be casual. "You didn't happen to write any of the anonymous notes correcting the display cards?" Her eyes pinned me. "If I had, they wouldn't be anonymous. I'm not in the habit of whispering facts." "Someone is," I said, "and they're whispering about your work." "I saw the accusation," she said calmly. "It was clumsy. My dates were right. Whoever wrote it wanted attention, not accuracy. You may tell Ms. Nero that her saboteur underestimates my patience." That was as much warmth as I was likely to get. I closed the notebook and stood. "You have any enemies among the staff?" Anyone who enjoys correction as much as you do? Emmett Crow, she said without pause. He calls himself a curator, but what he really curates is disdain. He despises donors, administrators, and punctuation equally. Sounds charming, I said. Charm is for the dishonest, she replied. I thanked her for her hospitality, which had been theoretical, and left. As I stepped into the cold, I had the feeling she was the kind who could be honest enough to commit sabotage if she thought truth required it. But she'd brag, not hide. Wolfe would like her for that. Emmett Crow's studio office was across town in a repurposed factory space that smelled of varnish and self-importance. He greeted me with a nod that carried all the warmth of an obituary notice. "So you're Wolfe's man," he said, leaning against a drafting table. "The great detective who sends a typist with muscles to do his looking." "Muscles are optional," I said. "Typing's extra." He chuckled once. "Merrow's panicking, I suppose. A few mysterious notes, and she calls in the philosopher king of gourmand. You don't seem concerned." "I'm not. The notes are accurate, most of them. If someone's pricking her pride, it's overdue. She's been polishing the truth until it reflects her own face." "That's poetic," I said. "You write the notes yourself?" "If I wanted to correct her, I'd do it in print." He pointed to a stack of journals on the table. "Publication is the only real revenge." "But someone's making it personal," I said, "changing her placards, targeting her colleagues." He shrugged. "The Foundation is a nest of egos. You shake it, feathers fly. If you want culprits, start with who benefits when Merrow looks incompetent." "Meaning?" "Gabriel Dorrell," he said, savagely pleased, "our benefactor with the conscience of a stock ticker. He funds the Foundation but wants control, more events, more media. Lila stands in his way. These little embarrassments weaken her." That had weight. I thanked him, and he waved it off, already bored. As I left, I caught sight of a small card pinned near his desk lamp, a replica of the exhibit placard. It read, "This is not an error. It is a kindness." I asked about it. He glanced over. "Someone slipped that under my door yesterday. I kept it as a souvenir. Why? Is it evidence?" "Maybe," I said. "Depends on the definition of kindness." By the time I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, reading with the serenity of a monk who'd won an argument with God. I gave him the rundown. Shu's precision, Crow's contempt, Dorrell's ambition. He listened without moving more than a finger. When I mentioned Crow's placard souvenir, his eyes opened. He kept it, pinned it on the wall like a trophy. "Foolish," Wolfe muttered. "The guilty preserve what condemns them out of vanity. The innocent discard what bores them." "You think he's guilty?" "No," Wolfe said slowly. "He is too overt, but the note's reappearance is telling. The author wants visibility. The gesture is theatrical. Then we're dealing with someone who performs honesty for effect." "Precisely. Tomorrow you will visit Mr. Dorrell. Learn what he gains by Ms. Merrow's humiliation. If he denies it too smoothly, we'll have our performer." He leaned back, closing his eyes again. "This affair, Archie, is less about lies than about who owns the right to tell the truth. And that," he said, "is always a dangerous contest." I left him to his thoughts, though the orchids swayed slightly as if they'd overheard something human and disapproved. Gabriel Dorrell's office was the kind of place that didn't have to announce success. It exhaled it. The reception area glowed with the subdued hush of money at rest. His assistant, a woman whose smile had been trained to appear only when safe, led me into a corner suite that could have been mistaken for a penthouse if not for the discreet skyline framed behind glass. Dorrell himself stood at the window, hands in pockets, the posture of a man inspecting his kingdom for signs of underperformance. He turned when I introduced myself, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Nero Wolfe's operative. Miss Merrow didn't waste time, did she?" Wolfe doesn't waste anything, I said. Least of all time that belongs to him. Dorrell motioned toward a leather chair opposite his desk, the kind that looks comfortable right up until it reminds you whose office you're in. So, what do you want to know? Let's start with what I already do, I said. You fund the Verity Foundation. You sit on its board, and lately, you and Ms. Merrow don't see eye to eye on the direction of the place. He gave a small laugh, rehearsed, effortless. Lila is brilliant, visionary even. But she forgets who pays for her vision. I believe culture should engage, not molder in archives. She thinks an exhibit should whisper. I prefer it to speak. Loudly? Loud enough to be heard beyond the room? I nodded. And this business with the tampered displays? Do you think it's her fault? Fault? He tilted his head, amused. She invited scrutiny. When you claim to reveal truth, don't be surprised if someone tests your sincerity. Though I admit the timing is unfortunate. The press preview is in 3 days. Do you have any idea who might be behind the sabotage? I could make a list, he said, but it would be redundant. Everyone resents Lila eventually. She has the grace of a blade. He picked up a crystal paperweight, rolling it idly in his hand. I'm not in the habit of anonymous attacks, Mr. Goodwin. If I wanted her undermined, I'd do it in a meeting, with minutes recorded. That's one way to be honest, I said. He smiled faintly. Honesty is overrated. It's a tool, not a virtue. Still, you can tell Wolfe that I'd prefer the exhibit to open on schedule. I have guests flying in for the gala, and I'd hate for their kindness to be tested. The word hung there like an echo that knew exactly where it came from. I watched him carefully, but he didn't flinch. He replaced the paperweight, sat, and gave me a look that meant the audience was over. On my way out, the assistant intercepted me with a folded note. Mr. Dorrell asked me to give you this, she said, but her tone suggested she hadn't asked for the honor. I unfolded it in the elevator. In tidy handwriting, ask Crow about the missing ledger. You'll find that kindness often conceals theft. By the time I reached the brownstone, it was early evening. Fritz's cooking had filled the air with something rich enough to make confessions seem reasonable. Wolfe was at his desk, reading a monograph on 18th-century condiments, which in his world was leisure reading. I handed him Durrell's note and reported the visit. He read, grunted once, and set it aside. Interesting, he said. Mr. Dorrell plays chess with information, but prefers the endgame to the opening. Meaning? Meaning he knows something, but only enough to imply guilt elsewhere. The missing ledger. Did Ms. Merrow mention one? No, I said. But she did say a donor's provenance was under question. That could be the same thing. He nodded slightly. Find out. If a document vanished, someone replaced it with narrative. That is our saboteur's signature. Crow's next? I asked. Not yet. Call Saul Panzer. Have him check the Foundation's security vendor. See who handles their systems and whether anyone has accessed footage unofficially. If we are to pursue Honesty's impersonator, we require a broader lens. I phoned Saul and gave him the rundown. By the time I hung up, Wolfe had closed his book and was gazing at the tin of grains of paradise still sitting on the corner of his desk. It is curious, he murmured, how often people believe they can season deceit to taste. I let that sit while I poured myself a beer. You think Dorrell's pulling strings? Perhaps. But strings do not always lead upward. Sometimes they anchor a puppet. Meaning Merrow? Meaning, he said, the puppet may not know she's dancing. The phone rang before I could answer. Saul's voice came clean and calm. Archie, got something. The Foundation's security footage for the past week was accessed remotely by a terminal registered to their registrar, Mara Pike. Logs show the transfer happened around midnight yesterday. I thanked him, hung up, and turned to Wolfe. Our registrar's moonlighting as a hacker. He frowned. Not quite. She is tidy, deliberate, cautious. Midnight is not her hour. Someone used her credentials, or she lent them. Want me to pay her a visit? Yes. And Archie, observe, don't accuse. If she's frightened, she'll reveal herself in what she protects, not in what she denies. I found Mara Pike that evening at a small cafe near the museum, a book open beside her untouched coffee. She looked up as I approached, suspicion and fatigue drawing equal lines on her face. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Miss Merrow said you'd be sniffing around." "I try not to," I said, sitting opposite her. "It spoils the flavor. You worked late last night?" Her eyes flickered. "Once, quick as a match strike." "No, I was home." "Funny," I said, "because the security system thinks your login took a midnight stroll through the archives." She paled, but held firm. "I didn't access it, I swear, but someone could have borrowed my credentials. The IT guy, he sometimes updates files remotely using our profiles." "Name?" "Felix Cardoza." "The janitor?" She shook her head. "His cousin. The janitor's family handles maintenance contracts. Felix covers the tech side." She hesitated. "Why? What's happening?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But someone's writing kind lies and erasing. Honest records. You might want to change your passwords before kindness strikes again." When I got back, Wolfe was still awake, a sign of either progress or irritation. I reported the exchange, ending with the janitor's cousin. He steepled his fingers, eyes distant. Cardoza, the same name on the security log the night of the first incident, a family enterprise of deception or a coincidence wrapped in convenience. "You don't believe in coincidence," I said. "Not when it offends reason," he replied. "Tomorrow bring both Cardozas to me. We shall see how kind they truly are." The orchid room's light dimmed as the timer clicked off. In the quiet that followed, Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed, and said softly, "Archie, do you know the worst deceit of all?" "No, but I have a feeling I'm about to." "It's the lie told for someone else's good," he said. "It demands gratitude and punishes truth, and we are surrounded by it." I couldn't argue with that. Some lies dress as kindness, others wear gloves and call on detectives. By 10 the next morning, both Cardozas, Felix and his cousin the janitor, were sitting in Wolfe's office, looking like they'd stumbled into the wrong congregation. The elder Cardoza, a compact man with hands like overused erasers, perched uneasily on the edge of the green chair. Felix, thin and nervous, kept tugging at his collar as though the air in the room were paid by the breath. Fritz had offered them coffee, which they refused. That was their first mistake. Wolfe sat immovable behind his desk, hands resting lightly on the arms of his chair, eyes closed in that deceptive way that meant he was not only awake, but already halfway to the verdict. I took my usual seat and began the interview the way Wolfe preferred. Gentle pressure before the blade. "Mr. Cardoza," I said to the elder, "you've been janitor at the Verity Foundation for how long?" 3 years, he said, voice gravelly from smoke or nerves. "No complaints, sir. I keep my head down." "Apparently not enough," I said. "You were logged in at the foundation the night a display was altered. That ring a bell?" He frowned. "No. I leave by 10 most nights. That one I remember. It was cold. I signed out. Rafe checked. Your cousin says you sometimes share access with him." Felix flinched before his cousin even reacted. I saw Wolfe's eyelids flicker open a millimeter. "I didn't share nothing," the older Cardoza said quickly. "He's family, sure, but work's work. He does the computers. I sweep floors." Felix rubbed his palms together. "Mr. Wolfe, I didn't mean anything wrong. The system's old. They don't have proper admin accounts. I log in under the registrar's credentials to run updates. Miss Pike knows." "She didn't last night," I said. "Her profile was used to access restricted footage around midnight." Felix swallowed. "That wasn't me." "Then who was it?" Wolfe asked, his voice slow and heavy, like honey dripped through marble. Maybe someone else got the password. I saved them on a shared drive. For convenience. Convenience, Wolfe repeated, eyes still half closed. The twin sister of negligence. Felix shifted, guilt radiating like cheap perfume. I swear, I didn't touch anything I shouldn't. I just keep the servers running. Servers do not sabotage placards, Wolfe said. Someone with access to digital archives replaced a document, and someone else replaced the truth. Cardoza Sr. leaned forward. We don't mess with exhibits, Mr. Wolfe. We clean, we fix lights. That's it. Wolfe opened his eyes fully now, the room seeming smaller by half. Yet your cousin's login traveled through the Foundation's network at 12:07 a.m. to an external server routed through an anonymizing host in Queens. Shall I assume the Foundation requested a backup in the dead of night? Felix's mouth opened, then closed. His silence was confession enough. Who paid you? Wolfe asked. Nobody, he blurted. I didn't sell anything. I just copied a few files. Ms. Merrow said she needed backups, just to keep safe in case of trouble with donors. She said it was confidential. Ms. Merrow, Wolfe repeated, as though tasting the name for seasoning. When did she request this? Last week. She gave me a flash drive. And you still have it? He shook his head. I gave it back to her the next morning. Wolfe's fingers drummed once on the armrest. Archie. That was my cue. You're both free to go, I said, rising. But keep your calendars open. We might have you back for a matinee. They left in a hurry that didn't quite rise to panic, just deep unease. When the door closed, I turned to Wolfe. So Merrow's been playing archivist and smuggler. She has been playing desperate, Wolfe said. Desperation corrupts intent faster than greed. The drive was not to protect the Foundation's secrets, but to conceal one. Probably the missing ledger Durrell hinted at. Indeed, if she removed it digitally, someone else retaliated physically, with placards and insinuation. The balance of power must have shifted. Between Merrow and Dorrell. Or between Merrow and the truth she curated, Wolfe said. We must invite her to explain herself, without warning. I phoned the Foundation. Merrow's assistant informed me she was in conference, which meant either hiding or cornering someone else. I left a message that Wolfe required her presence immediately. Then I headed down to confirm what Felix had told us. The Foundation was buzzing with the anxious energy of people pretending nothing was wrong. I found Rafe Simon near the exhibit hall, sleeves rolled up, taping signage that had already been taped twice. He looked up, his face pale and tight. Ms. Merrow's not here, he said before I could ask. She left an hour ago. Didn't say where. Did she take anything with her? He hesitated. A folder from her desk and her handbag. She seemed upset. I didn't have to ask why. Her exhibit was collapsing faster than good manners at a free buffet. I thanked him and made a slow circuit through the prep rooms. The missing placard space had been refilled with a replacement, bland, official, lifeless. But near the bottom edge, tucked under the molding of the display table, was a small torn slip of paper. I teased it free with a fingernail. It was the corner of a note, the same elegant type as before, the same clean serif. Only 2 words remained intact. Truth pending. Back at the brownstone, I handed it to Wolfe. He studied it, grunted, and reached for the small tin of grains of paradise. Opening it, he dropped the scrap inside as if sealing it for later use. She's frightened, he said quietly. Fright makes the honest inventive. It makes the guilty rash. You will find her before one becomes the other. Where do I start? Where she dines when she does not wish to be seen, he said. The restaurant she calls her retreat. Which is? The apiary, Wolfe said, almost smiling. Her old supplier with the bee seal owns it. It appears the hive is closing ranks. I grabbed my coat. "And if she doesn't want to talk?" "She will," Wolfe said. "Fear is a sharper interrogator than you are, Archie. But you may assist it." I was halfway to the door when he added, almost as an afterthought, "Do not underestimate her capacity for reason. Even cornered, a liar who believes she lies for good will argue with conviction." I looked back. "And if she's not lying?" Wolfe's eyes went distant again. "Then someone else is lying for her, and that," he said, "is the cruelest kindness of all." Outside, the city had that glassy chill before evening, and I headed downtown with the sense that the next conversation wouldn't be polite and might not be gentle either. The apiary sat tucked between a florist and a bookstore that specialized in regret. Used titles, all nearly new, and nothing that ever sold twice. Its brass sign bore that same embossed B I'd seen on the wax seal, and the smell drifting through the glass door could have converted atheists. Inside, a low hum of conversation folded into the clink of cutlery, and the air was warm enough to melt intentions. I spotted Lila Merrow at a corner table under a lattice of hanging herbs, her gloves beside a half-finished glass of wine. She was alone, though her posture had company, anxiety sitting squarely at her shoulder. When she saw me, her eyes widened a fraction before she masked it with a smile sharp enough to cut the air between us. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, voice composed. "Mr. Wolfe sends his regrets?" "Regrets and curiosity," I said. "You've been busy since we spoke." She gestured for me to sit, and I did, though I kept the table between us like a referee. "Busy is a polite word for survival," she said softly. "And survival has its own etiquette." "Does that etiquette involve hiring janitors to smuggle archives onto flash drives?" Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "You've spoken to Felix?" He spoke for himself. "Not well, but enough. You paid him to duplicate files, Foundation records." I asked him to make a private copy of materials I'd catalogued personally. "They were my work, Mr. Goodwin, my intellectual property." "Your missing ledger among them?" Her silence stretched thin as honey. Then she said, "That ledger is older than the Foundation. It belonged to a chef named Henri Marchand, whose heirs disputed its sale. Durrell wanted it as a centerpiece, proof that authenticity could be purchased. I refused. He insisted. I removed it before he could parade it like a trophy." "That's noble," I said, "if we define noble as risky and partly illegal." "I did what I had to. You can't build truth on ownership papers. That ledger is real history, uncomfortable, inconvenient, unpolished. Dorrell wanted to make it palatable. And someone decided to remind you that lies, gentle or not, don't stay buried." She looked up then, and for the first time since I'd met her, she wasn't performing control. She was holding on to it by the fingernails. "Do you think I wrote those notes?" "I think you might have provoked them. Someone staging an exhibition of their own, with you as the display." Her laugh was quiet but jagged. "I wish I had that kind of poetry left." "No, Mr. Goodwin, whoever's doing this knows too much. About me. About the Foundation. About what was redacted from those transcripts. Things even my board doesn't know. Then it's someone inside. Dorrell, Shue, Crow, Pike. Maybe all of them in a relay race for guilt." She shook her head. "Dorrell wants exposure, not subtlety. Shue is incapable of anonymous action. Crow delights in cruelty, but not precision. Mara, no. She's frightened of shadows, let alone causes. This is someone who understands our patterns and despises them." The waiter arrived with the check before either of us ordered more wine. She didn't touch it, just slid her gloves back on, eyes unfocused. "Tell Wolfe," she said, standing, "that I didn't come to him for protection. I came because he would understand what it means when the truth becomes an aesthetic. I thought he might even sympathize." "I'll tell him," I said. "But sympathy's not on the menu at the Brownstone." She hesitated, then reached into her handbag and produced a small envelope. "He'll want this. It's a copy of the Marchand ledger. Partial, not perfect. The original's safe." "Safe where?" "In a place even Durrell won't touch." That was the last thing she said before leaving, slipping through the door into the cold like a woman walking into her own conclusion. I watched the B insignia glint as it swung closed behind her. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was listening to Monteverdi and conducting with one finger. I set the envelope on his desk. "From Nero," I said. "A piece of the missing ledger, she claims." He opened it, extracted a few photocopied pages covered in tight 19th century script, and read silently for a moment. Then he frowned. "These are recipes, but annotated. See here, the marginalia." I leaned over. In the margin, beside a line about a sauce reduction, a delicate hand had written, "The guest must never know what softens the bitterness." "Pretty," I said. "If you like your philosophy, medium rare." "Not philosophy," Wolfe murmured. "Confession. This handwriting. Compare it to the anonymous notes." I pulled one from the case file. The phrase, "This is not an error. It is a kindness." The loops matched perfectly. Small, feminine, deliberate. "Lila Mero wrote the notes," I said. "No," Wolfe said quietly, eyes narrowing. "She copied them. The originals belonged to someone else, someone whose work she preserved and whose words she appropriated for the exhibit. That explains the sabotage." "You think our saboteur's avenging plagiarism?" "Precisely. Someone aware that Ms. Mero's integrity was curated as carefully as her archives. The ledger's true author, or their heir." He sat back, eyes distant. "You will locate Ms. Nero immediately. Bring her here. If she cannot be found, find Crow or Sue. This pattern will not pause." Before I could move, the phone rang. Fritz answered, listened, and handed the receiver to Wolfe. He spoke one word, "Yes," and then another, quieter, "Understood." He replaced the handset gently, as though sound might break it. "That was Inspector Kramer," he said. "Miss Nero was found near her apartment an hour ago. Her car, engine running, no sign of struggle." I waited. "She is dead," Wolfe said simply. "Gas asphyxiation. They are calling it suicide." The silence between us thickened like smoke. Finally I said, "You don't believe it." "I do not," he replied. "She valued control too much to surrender it. No, someone has perfected their performance of kindness. And now, Archie, we are the next audience." He reached for the tin of grains of paradise, twisted it open, and stared inside as though expecting it to answer. "Find who benefits most from her silence," he said. "And be swift." "Politeness," he added softly, "has killed enough for one case. Now, generate the final section of the story, ensuring a satisfying resolution. Maintain the logical progression of clues and character arcs, delivering the final reveal smoothly while keeping the ending impactful and true to the detective style."